Hi, everybody, and welcome to our lecture on Chapter 2, in which we're going to discuss issues surrounding management of stakeholders and stakeholder interests by the business entity. As always, at the beginning of each lecture, please familiarize yourself with the learning goals and objectives of each chapter. In Chapter 2, we're going to be identifying public issues and analyzing gaps between corporate performance and stakeholder expectations. We're going to be applying available tools or techniques to scan an organization's multiple environments and assessing stakeholder materiality. We're going to describe the steps in the issue management process and determining how to make the process most effective. We're going to identify the managerial skills required to respond to emerging issues effectively. We're going to look at understanding how businesses can effectively engage with its stakeholders, what drives this engagement, and what role social media can play in it. And finally, we're going to look at recognizing the value of creating stakeholder dialogue and networks. Corporations oftentimes find themselves intentionally or unintentionally embroiled in public issues. Think of United Airlines and the passenger issue some time back, or think of the Takata airbag recall that is currently going on. These are issues that can potentially engage a number of the stakeholders of the respective entity. The business entity must address stakeholder expectations, which are a mixture of attitudes, opinions, and beliefs about what constitutes reasonable behavior in a given situation. The failure to recognize those concerns, or when unanticipated concerns arise quickly, which is a crisis, problems can occur. Those problems can be depicted via what is called a performance expectation gap, wherein a gap exists between what is expected behavior by the entity, by its stakeholders, and what the actual behavior of that entity is. Slide 5 depicts such a gap. Socially responsible entities try to prevent those gaps from opening quickly to begin with, or opening at all to begin with. But if a gap does in fact open, to manage it and get it closed as quickly as possible. A business entity should engage in environmental analysis and scanning to assess the temperature of its stakeholders to determine if issues exist that might cause such a gap to occur. The entity should constantly scan the environment of business. Slide 7 is a graphical depiction of such a process. A business entity should be on the alert for issues arising in any of those sectors that might impact the business for good or bad. As you can see, those sectors include the customer environment, the competitor environment, the economic environment, the technological environment, the social environment, the political environment, the legal environment, and the geophysical environment. We'll be looking at each of those environments as we go through the course. Not only should a business entity be on the lookout for information that might impact it directly, it should also scan the environment for intelligence that can be used for a competitive advantage as well. Slide 9 is a graphical depiction of that interface using Semnitech as an example. As you can see, that particular business entity is constantly on the lookout for different problem areas in that potential business. There is a 5-step process that can be used to identify and address potential issues that may arise. This template can be applied to most issues that we'll come into contact with in this course. The first step is identifying the issue. This can be accomplished via environmental scanning. Good organizations should have contingencies for anticipated problems that might arise. For example, airlines have planes that crash. Food manufacturers have contamination that may occur to its product. Those should be issues that are potential, maybe not going to happen, but potentially could be a problem and should be dealt with by the company, or at least have contingent plans to do so. The second part is, once an issue has been identified, is to analyze the issue. How is this issue or crisis likely to develop? What is the arc of the problem? Is it short-lived or is it long-standing? Once the issue has been identified and analyzed, then the organization needs to generate options to deal with that issue. What potential solutions are there to address the issue or crisis? Next, once those options have been discussed and debated, the entity should take decisive action. It should implement the plan that it has come up with to deal with that particular issue. And then lastly, the organization should evaluate the results. Did the solution that it came up with solve the problem that that solution was designed to solve? If not, those issues should be reevaluated and new solutions should be applied. It is important to determine what part of the organization should be involved in addressing these issues. Some entities will hire outside crisis management firms to lead the organization through turbulent times. Each organization can adopt various strategies in building stakeholder relationships. The better the stakeholder relationship in times of calm, the easier it is for a corporation or business entity to deal with times of strife. Those particular strategies that are available to the company include an inactive approach, which is simply ignoring stakeholder concerns. Another approach, which is better than the first, but not much so, is reactive, where companies act only when forced to do so, and then in a defensive manner. A third approach is to be proactive, where companies try to anticipate stakeholder concerns before those arise and engage with the stakeholders. And then the fourth step is what's known as interactive approach, where companies or entities should actively engage stakeholders in an ongoing relationship, in good times and bad, of mutual respect, openness, and trust. As we will see, this should be the strategy of any socially responsible organization. Excuse me. Stakeholder engagement is at its core a relationship. The participation of a business organization and at least one of its stakeholders is necessary to have that engaged relationship. A business should constantly be trying to maintain positive relationships with stakeholders in good times and bad. Keep the stakeholders engaged. Excuse me. Social media can be a sword or a shield, and social media can be used to maintain ties with stakeholders. It can also result in an issue going viral. In other words, a small issue becoming a large issue very quickly. It's important to have an effective social media strategy, and we'll talk about that later on in the course. Slide 15 is a graphical depiction of a proactive stakeholder network wherein the entity is looking at working interactively with its various stakeholders. Creating networks of stakeholders within which to collaborate should be the goal of every socially responsible organization. Throughout the course, we will see examples of good stakeholder networks, bad stakeholder networks, and no stakeholder networks. As noted in your text, there's very little downside to engaging with stakeholders. Creating good buzz and goodwill that can be used in bad times are just a few of the benefits of socially responsible behavior.